Hi, I'm Roy Crown from Revelation Trust, and welcome to a brand new series of Gospel Entrepreneurs. In this podcast, I'll find out what makes Christian entrepreneurs stand out, whether they're in church, business, or in the community. And I'm thrilled today to have my great friend, the Evangelist Jay join. I've known John for over 40 years, I think. We both started in ministry together. And I'm really looking forward to what he has to bring. His style is engaging, his enthusiasm, and I'm sure we're all going to be encouraged by what he's going to bring to us. So sit back and enjoy John. John, it's great to see you, albeit virtually.
Roy, it's wonderful to see you too. And as you said in your intro, we've been friends for over 40 years and we've been doing the work of evangelism, the work of being an evangelist. And it's great to be in conversation today with you.
Absolutely amazing. And this is Gospel Entrepreneurs, because John, you're a bit of an entrepreneur, really. I know you're an evangelist. Everybody will know you as that, but you've been very entrepreneurial in some of the ideas, some of the initiatives that you've taken. Where do you think that came from, John?
Roy, I think both you and I, we've endeavored to always be creative, and we've always endeavored to think creatively, think outside of the box, and think throughout every decade. I think both of us have tried to think, well, what's another way of communicating in order to engage a new generation of people? So, I think I've got so many trains, Roy, running in my head, not enough rail tracks.
So give us one idea that was just an idea. It wasn't there. You just thought, I wonder if that'll work. You were obviously gospel front and center. Just one story where you pushed something and it just flew. It just kind of cracked on. And then we'll have a look at maybe one that wasn't as successful. Just give us one story, John. Okay. You've got loads.
The one that came to my mind as soon as you were asking the question was, if we go back to 1999, we're all going to go into a new year. We're all going to go into a new millennium. And we're all praying, we're all seeking the Lord, what's the significance of the new year, new millennium, and what part can we each all play? And I prayed the same. And I just had this idea. It just came to me, preach the 10 Commandments.
Right.
And it was such a random thought, Roy. And I thought, preach the 10 Commandments. Where did that come from? Now, I became a Christian, a follower of Jesus in 1975. Okay, so now we're 1999. From 1975 to 1999, I've been a member of various churches. I had never heard a sermon on the 10 Commandments.
Oh, really?
No. I mean, I've heard the 10 Commandments referenced, but I'd never heard 10 sermons on the 10 Commandments. Anyway, I thought, well, let me think this one through. And I got 10 pads of paper. I know I could have got 10 sheets of paper, but I got 10 pads of paper. I laid them all out on this big table and I numbered them 1 to 10. And then I wrote the actual commandment on each one. And as I did that, I thought, wait a minute, Top of the Pops, they do it the other way round, 10, 9, 8. So then I turned my pads the other way round.
I can't believe you said Top of the Pops, Jay.
I know.
That ages us just a little bit.
Just a little bit. But then I did 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And the verses were thou shalt not, thou shalt not. And I thought, right, okay, what does that mean today? So the 10th commandment, do not covet. And so I created the title, How to Find True Contentment. And then the next commandment was lying and do not lie. So I created the title, How to Hold to the Truth. And then stealing, how to prosper with a clear conscience. And then adultery, how to affair-proof your relationships, and so on. So they were 10 how-to titles. And I said to my minister, I said, listen, can you let me have the 10 Sunday nights? I'll preach because I've got this idea. It might be an idea, it might be a good idea or a God idea. He goes, absolutely. So I did the first one, coveting. And I thought, wow, something's happening here. And then I did lying, and then I did stealing. In the middle of my talk at stealing, I got an idea. Tell everyone to return their stolen goods. And if they can't return their stolen goods, we'll have amnesty dustbins, and they can bring all their stolen goods.
This is in a church service to a group of Christians.
Yes. Bring all your stolen goods, and we will distribute the value of the stolen goods to hospitals, hospices, and homeless shelters. So anyway, I ended up doing that series 36 times in 34 cities in the UK. I did it in New York and I did it in Sydney. And attendance exceeded 1 million at these meetings. And the stolen goods, oh my word. Throughout the 36 times that we did it, we had £500,000 in cash.
Wow.
Put into the dustbins. In cash, we had 1,000 hotel bathrobes. We had computers, we had antiques, we had jewelry, we had diamonds. It's amazing the stuff that was put in, and every penny, Roy, was given to children's hospitals, hospices, and homeless shelters. And then when we got to the idols one, we had an amnesty for all types of stuff, you know, whether it was Ouija boards, tarot cards, all of that. And then we did a cleansing. But when we did murder, we had an amnesty for knives, guns, and ammunition. And when we did it in Liverpool, there was so much ammunition, the police had to send 2 armored vehicles to take it away.
Wow.
And what's interesting there, Roy, is that the national press, secular press, couldn't believe this. They're so intrigued by it that they're covering the stories. So it's not like we're begging newspaper coverage, but they're all covering the stories. So that's one idea where it just comes as an idea. And what we've got to do, and people like you and I, we're thinking, okay, is that a God idea? Is that a good idea? I did it at my local church. And when I did it at my local church, I felt this is different. There is something different about this. And I think also, when I did do it, Roy, I did it in my local church for 10 Sundays. Then when I did it in cities, I did 3 a week. So I did 10 Mondays in one city, 10 Wednesdays in another city, and then 10 Saturdays in another city. And I just think the 10-week period broke something. And what we found is doing them in reverse order, you know, coveting, lying, stealing, adultery, murder, parents. When you got down to 4, 3, 2, 1, it was as if you hardly shook the tree and all the fruit just fell.
Wow. And you had a positive spin on what could be seen as a negative commandment as well.
Yes. And when we put the 10 titles on a postcard, and then we got Christians all to take 20 postcards each and give them out to friends, family, neighbors, and colleagues, a lot of the unchurched people would look at the card and go, oh, I'm coming to that one, how to affair-proof your relationships, or I'm coming to how to keep the peace with your parents. And in our research, we discovered that when people started coming, they kept coming.
And that was very entrepreneurial. It was the Lord, but you then had to put the thing in place and push it out there and do it. Some people listening to this may get the idea, but don't have the courage to take the next step, John. What would you say to them in kind of pushing forward? Maybe they're young, they're an evangelist, they're listening to you today and thinking, well, that's J. John. What would you give to them to do?
I love that quotation, Roy, very much. Go as far as you can see and see how far you can go. And there's biblical verses to support that, isn't it? When you take a step, you know, so how far can I see? Well, I can see as far as there. Okay, well, walk to the end of there. And when you walk to the end of there, you'll see further. So go as far as you can see and see how far you can go. The Japanese fish, koi, if you put it into a very small fish bowl, it'll grow to about 2-3 inches. But if you take it out of the bowl and you put it into a tank, it will grow to 8 inches. But if you take it out of a tank and put it into a pond, it can grow up to 42 inches. So I think sometimes either we're restricted by other people or we actually restrict ourselves, Roy. We think, oh, I'd rather be a big fish in a small pond rather than be out of my place in a lake or something. But God has put potential in us. And if you think of people playing football, there's different types of people. There are people who love playing football. But
I didn't think you were a big football fan, John. I didn't think you did football.
I watch football. But like, for example, I can imagine you and I might play with our kids, our sons in the garden. Okay, but there are some people who are good at it and they play amateur football. But there's some who are very good, they play professional football. And there's some who are brilliant and they play in the Premiership and they play for their country. Now, if your potential was always to play in the Premiership and play for your country, it will be a huge disappointment if you were playing amateur football. We're not criticizing people who play amateur football. What we're saying is, what is your potential? Have you allowed God to maximize what he created in you when you were born?
And I think that kind of entrepreneurial spirit is so gospel and biblical orientated because God wants us to believe and step out, take the risk, push forward. You've done it on 10, John. What else have you done it on that didn't work, where you thought, I'm going to do this, I'm going to have a go, and then it just didn't happen or you liked it to happen?
Well, I think the thing is, when it didn't happen, I think it's not so much it didn't happen. It may not have happened in the way that we would have liked it to happen. Yeah?
Yeah.
So, okay. So, for example, right, I really felt, Roy, and again, you know, is it an idea, a good idea? Was it a God idea? I really felt we should put the Emirates Football Stadium and preach the gospel. So we contacted them and they said, well, what do you want to do? We said, well, we want to preach the gospel in the Emirates Football Stadium. And they're like, we only normally rent it out to, you know, serious big bands. And we're not going to let you have it. So I was a bit disappointed. I thought, oh, I'm sure it was the Emirates Football Stadium. And I thought, well, maybe I got the wrong stadium. You know, maybe it's another stadium. So anyway, while we're waiting and praying about whether we got the wrong stadium, they came back to us and said, we've changed our minds. We want you to have it. So first there was a bit of a discouragement and then we can have it. Okay, now it's a massive enterprise to do this.
Massive.
Oh, massive. You know, I started getting criticized by church leaders and that causes discouragement. And there was one church leader who said to me, oh, you're wasting God's money trying to do this. And I said to this particular church leader, I said, listen, when Jesus went to the Gerasenes, there was a man there foaming from the mouth, and he had demons in him called Legion. And Jesus cast out the demons into 2,000 pigs. They ran down a lake and they drowned. And I said to this leader, I said, do you know how much 2,000 pigs would cost if you bought them today? Now, he didn't know, but I do know, Roy, because I've researched it.
Of course you did know.
I did. If we bought, Roy, 2,000 pigs today in England, they would cost £350,000. Jesus sacrificed 2,000 pigs to help one man. In other words, one man was worth more than the local economy. How much are we willing to invest to reach lost people? So I was like, it doesn't matter that this is going to end up costing us 1.2 million. Anyway, we did it. And there were struggles along the way. You know,
correct.
We're building a stage over all the chairs, but then we didn't realize that we'd have to have a track laid down in order to bring certain machinery, and you know the track alone was like £45,000. You know, there's hidden things that you didn't realize. So on the way, it's like, oh my word, it's hard work. But no, did God say? That's the question. And we felt, yeah, no, God did tell us to do this. We did it, Roy. 26,000 people came. No, we didn't fill the stadium. But actually, Roy, you can't fit 26,000 people into Wimbledon. And 3 2,617 people received Christ.
And in the end, J. John, it's that spirit that says, well, if God's spoken, I need to take the steps to see, and then God opens. But it doesn't mean that we're not going to be criticized. It doesn't mean that everybody's not going to see it the way we see it, because the entrepreneur sees things that others don't see. And that's where I think you create history. That's where I think you create the dynamic. That's where we as evangelists believe the gospel and people will come to faith. But the entrepreneur, that spirit of, it has the power of God.
Definitely, Roy. You know, Nehemiah, I think of Nehemiah in the Old Testament, and when he started to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, a guy called Sanballat criticized him, and then a guy called Tobiah criticized him, and
Correct.
then a guy called Geshem criticized him, and Nehemiah didn't engage with them, he ignored them. You know, so if we go back, another thought that just came to my mind, Roy, okay, go back to the first lockdown, 2020. So I don't know what it was like for you, but within 2 days, Roy, 48 hours, I had 9 months of ministry cancelled.
Yeah.
I had missions, major missions. The thing that we did at the Emirates Stadium was called Just One. And we were going to do this all over England, or all over the UK, right? We had Just Ones cancelled. We had missions, meetings, carol services in 48 hours. So I thought, okay, we've got a team of 12 full-time staff. Okay, what are we going to do? So I thought, well, why don't we produce a resource?
Yeah.
I thought, well, produce a resource. And I called it Share. So like Share Easter, Share Pentecost, Share Father's Day, Share Faith, Hope and Love, Share Christmas. Anyway, I thought, right, okay, let's produce a resource. Let's put it together for the churches that don't have the technology to put it together, but also provide it as a separate menu for churches that have got the technology, but they don't want to use all the components. And I prayed in my heart, Roy, well, we're going to put a lot of work into this. It's going to take a lot of creativity, but oh Lord, wouldn't it be great? Wouldn't it be great, Lord, if 100 churches used it? I thought 100 would be amazing. Anyway, we did it, Roy. 2,016 churches used it. So, Roy, I preached in more churches during lockdown than I did before. And the other thing is, I'm actually doing this interview with you, Roy, in our studio. Now, this was my office. And during lockdown, I thought, well, there's nobody in my office. So we ripped out the entire office and we built a studio.
Because let's face it, we all had to pivot, didn't we? The whole world had to pivot. But hey, we're kind of coming into land a bit, J. John. There's a lot of people listening to that. They'll be really inspired and encouraged. And some of them got ideas. They may be challenged, like Nehemiah, with some people that are criticizing. This is a unique moment for the gospel, John, isn't it? The entrepreneur has got to see things and just go for it. What would you say, local church leader, younger guy thinking, what can I do? What's God placed into my hand? I think you and I, we've been at this 40 years. We've been very entrepreneurial in some of the initiatives, some of the things we've taken. But it's the simple steps, praying, hearing God, but then taking those steps and putting them into action. What would you say, J. John? Someone listening, I'm a bit of a gospel entrepreneur. I want to do some things for God. I want to push forward with God. What are some hooks that you give to them, J. John?
Well, a couple of things come to mind, Roy. First of all, okay, I'm going to make a statement. We only have enough time to do the will of God. Is that true? The answer is yes, it is true. We only have enough time to do the will of God. If it's true that we only have enough time to do the will of God, why do we keep saying we don't have enough time? It must be because of one of two reasons. One, we are doing things that are not the will of God, or they are the will of God, but someone else should be doing it.
Yeah.
So I think at the moment there's a lot of stressed burnt out leaders. I like what God said to Elijah. He said to Elijah, have a snack and then have a nap. So that was God's advice to a leader. Have a snack and have a nap. And look, I want to encourage church leaders to look after themselves.
Yeah.
Very, very important. A lot of us in ministry, Roy, we've got so many irons in the fire that we've actually put the fire out. And what we need to do is to take out some irons and stoke up the fire. So I would encourage a church leader to stoke up the fire. Now, you mentioned it as you were asking that question, and it reminds me of Acts chapter 6. My relatives are talked about there. The Greek-speaking widows are being neglected in the distribution of food. So this is an issue regarding social responsibility, and it's brought to the apostles. And the apostles said, yes, this is very important, but it's not important for us. And they found 7 people full of the Holy Spirit to take care of an issue regarding social responsibility. And the apostles said, we will turn our attention to 2 things, prayer and the ministry of the word. Now, how interesting. Based on that one story, and of course, Roy, there are other stories and we've got to hold them all together. But based on that story, you could say that the apostolic priorities were prayer and the ministry of the word. And I would suggest to you, Roy, like yourself, I've been up and down this country for 42 years. I've met thousands of church leaders. Those are the 2 things that most church leaders do the least: prayer and the ministry of the word. Do you know, a friend of mine became a vicar of a church in London, and he rang me up. I've been helping him over the years, and he goes, J. John, what advice have you got? So I said to him, this is what I want you to do. 1 hour a day, 5 days a week, not your day off, not Sunday. Walk around your parish and pray for an hour. Just pray for 1 hour every day and just greet people. So I give him this advice, and the guy goes, you got any other advice? Listen, Roy, if we could encourage all church leaders to make prayer and the ministry of the word a priority, then God will guide your steps.
And the other thing is, J. John, if you take the Acts 6, when they did that, the church grew. So the problem was these people were being neglected. They then said, you're not doing what you're told. So they delegated in place. They then did what they were called to do, and the church grew even more. It's God's agenda that we live with.
Absolutely. And the one thing, can I just say one thing? What do we do, Roy? What is it that the church does? Well, the church does 3 things. Look up, worship. Look in, well-being. Look out, witness. That's what we do. Worship, well-being, witness. But research indicates, Roy, that we spend over 95% of all of our time, energy, money, resources, manpower, womanpower on worship and well-being. So I want to encourage the church leaders to say, look, yes, worship, well-being, witness, but why don't we realign those? 33% for worship, 33% for well-being, 33% for witness. Honestly, this is an incredible, fertile season. And
Absolutely.
We need to seize the season and see as far as you can go. Go as far as you can see and see how far you can go. That's it.
John, you are the master of one-liners. You are the master of little anecdotal pieces. You just throw them out there. You've got one for every subject. You're amazing, Jay.
Well, I'll just tell you this. A couple of weeks ago, I spoke at a conference for church leaders, and the subject was how to preach. And the guy introducing me said, J. John, how shall I introduce you? I said, just say J. John is a donkey. He goes, no, I can't say that. I said, no. You asked me and I'm telling you, say that I'm a donkey. He goes, I can't say you're a donkey. I said, that's what I want you to say. So he gets up and he says, J. John told me to say he's a donkey. And then I walk on. I said, guys, do you remember when Jesus came on a donkey into Jerusalem? The donkey thought it was all about him. He couldn't believe it. The donkey, this was his first outing as a donkey, and everyone's applauding the donkey. And they don't want the donkey to get his feet dirty, and they're even laying down all their coats, until he realized that later in the evening, it wasn't about him. It was about Jesus. Listen, we only carry Jesus.
Amen. And it's been a real joy to have the donkey with me today.
You got it. You got it, Roy. You got it.
Thanks so much, John, for giving the time. Loads of respect and appreciation. And we'll meet up soon.
Always. Thank you, Roy. Thanks very much for having me on your program.
Thanks so much, John, for joining me today. You were amazing, as always, and some great insights. The impact of communicating the gospel and then just seeing the way people had dealt with the issue of repentance and changed, and phenomenal. So encouraging. That's why we need to keep going for it and keep moving forward. I'll be back next week with another guest. But if you enjoyed Gospel Entrepreneurs, we would also love for you to leave a rating or review if you can. Thanks for listening today. Gospel Entrepreneurs is a UCB podcast in partnership with Revelation Trust. This is Roy Crown. Till the next time, God bless you.